I learned I was fired from my father's company at exactly 11:43 a.m. on a live television broadcast watched by 2.7 million people. The strange part wasn't that I got fired. The strange part was that nobody had told me beforehand. Not human resources, not the board, not my assistant, not even my father. One second I was sitting beside him on stage. The next second my entire career was over. And my sister was smiling. My name is Claire Harrison. I'm 34 years old. I have a master's degree in finance from Northwestern University. I spent 11 years working for Harrison Logistics Group, a transportation company worth roughly $1.4 billion. My grandfather founded it in 1978 with 3 trucks and a rented warehouse outside Chicago. My father inherited it. I helped expand it. And apparently neither of those facts mattered. The broadcast was supposed to be routine. Every quarter my father hosted a shareholder update streamed on financial news networks. Nothing unusual. Nothing dramatic. At least that's what I thought. The auditorium held around 400 investors. Several television crews were present. Analysts filled the first few rows. My father sat in the center. I sat on his right. My younger sister Vanessa sat on his left. Vanessa was 31. Unlike me, she had never worked outside the family company. She had joined straight after college. She was charismatic, popular, good at public relations, but she knew almost nothing about operations or finance. Most important decisions still came through me. At least they had until that morning. The presentation lasted 42 minutes. Revenue was up, profits were strong, investors seemed happy. Everything looked normal. Then my father reached the final slide. He smiled, adjusted his microphone, and said words that changed my life. Before we conclude today's meeting, I would like to announce an organizational transition. I remember looking toward the screen. There wasn't a slide for this. That seemed odd. Then he continued, I want to personally thank Claire Harrison for her years of service to this company. I blinked. A few people started clapping. I smiled politely, still completely confused. My father continued speaking. Claire has decided to pursue opportunities outside Harrison Logistics Group and will be stepping down from her position effective immediately. The applause became louder. For several seconds I honestly believed he had misspoken. I turned toward him, waiting for him to correct himself. He didn't. Instead, he looked directly into the camera. On behalf of the company, thank you, Claire. We wish you success in your future endeavors. The audience stood. People were clapping. Reporters were writing. Investors were smiling, and I was sitting there wondering if I had lost my mind. Because I had never resigned. Not verbally, not in writing, not privately, not publicly. Nothing. I slowly turned toward my father. He avoided eye contact. Then I looked at Vanessa. That was when I saw it, the smile. Not a happy smile. Not surprise, not confusion. A smile that said she already knew. A smile that said this had been planned. A smile that said everyone at that table understood what was happening except me. That hurt more than the firing itself. The broadcast ended 38 seconds later. The cameras shut off. The audience began leaving. Immediately I stood up. What was that? My father gathered his papers, calmly, methodically, like we were discussing weather. Not here. What do you mean not here? You just told the entire country I quit. You'll receive documentation this afternoon. Documentation. Not explanation. Documentation. Vanessa stood and adjusted her jacket, still refusing to meet my eyes. Vanessa? Nothing. She simply walked away. For the first time in my life, I felt genuinely betrayed by my own family. 3 hours later, an email arrived. The subject line contained 7 words. Notice of termination of employment. I stared at my laptop, read it once, read it again, then a third time. The company claimed my departure was part of a restructuring initiative. My access was revoked immediately. My company phone was disabled. My office would be cleared by staff, security credentials terminated, parking access removed 11 years, reduced to a 6-page PDF. That night I called my father 17 times. No answer. I sent texts, no response. I emailed him. Nothing. At 10:14 p.m. I finally received a message. 1 sentence. We'll discuss it later. That was all. No explanation, no apology, no reason. Just later. The next 2 days were miserable. Financial blogs published articles. Industry websites repeated the announcement. Former coworkers called asking questions I couldn't answer. The worst part was pretending I understood what had happened, because I didn't. Then 72 hours later, something happened that made me realize my firing wasn't an isolated event. On Monday morning, Harrison Logistics announced 2 more executive departures. Mark Davidson, Chief Compliance Officer, age 52, 21 years with the company, and Linda Ruiz, Senior Internal Auditor, age 48, 13 years with the company. Both terminated, effective immediately. No explanation, no farewell statement, nothing. That was when my confusion turned into suspicion, because I knew both of them. Mark was obsessive about regulations. Linda practically lived inside financial reports. Neither person would be removed without a serious reason, or unless they had discovered something. I spent that entire afternoon staring at the announcement. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. My father had fired 3 people in less than 1 week, and all 3 of us had one thing in common. We had access to sensitive financial information. That realization wouldn't let go. For 11 years, my job involved analyzing operational data, patterns, numbers, cash flow, risk. When something didn't fit, I noticed. And this didn't fit at all. So I made a decision. If nobody was going to tell me why I had been fired, I would find out myself. At first, I told myself it was about closure. Maybe I wanted an explanation. Maybe I wanted proof I hadn't done anything wrong. Maybe I simply wanted answers. The truth is simpler. I was angry. And angry people dig deeper than curious people. I started with public records. Nothing unusual. Then corporate filings. Still nothing. Then vendor reports. A few irregularities appeared. Small inconsistencies, not enough to mean anything, but enough to make me keep looking. One payment caught my attention. Then another. Then another. Different companies, different dates, same pattern. Money leaving Harrison Logistics through consulting agreements. Large consulting agreements. The first totaled $420,000, the second was $670,000. The third exceeded $1.1 million. Yet none of the consulting firms appeared to have employees. No websites, no public profiles, no business activity, almost like they existed only on paper. I remember staring at my monitor at 1:37 a.m., feeling a cold sensation in my stomach, because suddenly a possibility appeared, and once it appeared, I couldn't ignore it. What if I hadn't been fired because of poor performance? What if I had been fired because I was getting too close to something? I spent the next week digging, then another week, then another, and eventually I discovered a number that changed everything. $28 million. That was how much money appeared to have disappeared from company accounts over 4 years. 28 million. Not accidentally. Not through mistakes. Systematically. Carefully. Deliberately. Someone had built an entire hidden network designed to move money out of the company without attracting attention. And as I followed the trail, one terrifying fact became impossible to ignore. The people connected to those transactions weren't strangers. They were people my father trusted. People my sister met with regularly. People who attended family dinners. People who sat beside us at Christmas. The deeper I looked, the worse it became. Then, one Thursday afternoon, I found something that made my hands shake. A signature. A single approval signature attached to a transfer worth $3.8 million. The name at the bottom of the page was my father's. And in that moment, I realized something that terrified me. This wasn't corruption happening behind my father's back. My father was part of it. And if that was true, then maybe I hadn't been fired because I found the truth. Maybe I had been fired because I was about to expose it. According to the letter, the corruption had started exactly as Margaret described. Years earlier, Vanessa had accumulated enormous personal debts through failed investments. My father covered them, then covered more, then even more. At first, he believed he was helping his daughter. Instead, he created a monster. The letter detailed years of lies, hidden accounts, secret partnerships, illegal transfers, board members bought with money, executives rewarded for silence, and eventually a company operating 2 completely different realities, the public company and the private criminal enterprise hidden inside it. Then I reached the paragraph that made me stop breathing. 3 years ago, I attempted to end it. Vanessa refused. She threatened to expose everyone involved, including me. The board sided with her. By then, I no longer controlled the machine I created. I reread the sentence twice, then a third time. The board sided with her. Suddenly everything made sense. My father's fear, his phone call, his warning. Vanessa wasn't following orders anymore. She was giving them. The next page contained names, account numbers, property records, offshore entities. Evidence, enough evidence to destroy careers, enough evidence to launch criminal prosecutions, enough evidence to bring down nearly everyone involved. Then I reached the final section, the section explaining why I had been fired. Claire, you were getting too close. Your audit request started uncovering transactions nobody was supposed to question. Vanessa wanted you removed permanently from the company. I chose public termination because it was the only way to separate you from the investigation before they considered more drastic options. I hated you for months after reading that sentence. Then I hated myself for believing it, because deep down I knew it was true. The public firing had destroyed my career, but it had also removed me from the environment where everyone else became compromised. The final line nearly broke me. You may never forgive me, you probably shouldn't, but you were the only honest person left. Dad. I sat in silence for a long time. Then Richard pushed another folder across the desk. There's more. Inside were legal documents, ownership documents, voting agreements, trust records. I frowned. What am I looking at? Richard adjusted his glasses, then delivered the sentence that changed everything. Your father transferred controlling authority 6 months ago. I stared at him. What? You now control 51% of voting shares. For several seconds I couldn't speak. The room seemed to tilt sideways. 51%. Not 10, not 15. Control, actual control, the majority stake, the company, the board, everything. Vanessa didn't know, neither did the other directors. My father had hidden the transfer through a complex trust structure. The documents were legal, binding, immediate. The emergency board meeting was scheduled to begin in 40 minutes. And nobody inside that room knew they no longer controlled the company. I arrived 22 minutes after the meeting started. The security guard tried stopping me until Richard handed him the documents. Then everything changed. The boardroom fell silent when I entered. 12 directors sat around the table. Vanessa occupied the seat at the head, my father's seat. She looked irritated, then confused, then worried. Richard handed out copies. One by one, I watched faces change, confidence, confusion, panic. Vanessa flipped through pages, faster, faster. Then suddenly stopped. Her face turned white. This isn't possible. Richard remained calm. It is. You forged this. No, you forged all of it. No. The board members began reading. Nobody spoke. The silence became almost painful. Finally, one director cleared his throat. These documents appear valid. Another nodded. So do I. Then another. And another. The room shifted. You could feel it. People who spent years supporting Vanessa suddenly started calculating survival. Because that's what power does. It changes loyalties. Fast. Vanessa stood. This is ridiculous. Nobody responded. Say something. Nobody moved. For the first time in her life, she was completely alone. Then Richard spoke. There is one more matter. He activated the projector. The screen illuminated. A spreadsheet appeared. Then another. Then another. Hundreds of transactions. Millions of dollars. Evidence. The evidence my father left behind. The evidence I spent months collecting. The evidence federal investigators were already requesting. Nobody needed explanations. The numbers spoke for themselves. One board member removed his glasses. Another lowered his head. A third quietly asked for legal counsel. Vanessa simply stared at the screen, watching years of secrets collapse. The federal investigation accelerated immediately afterward. Arrests followed, then indictments, then plea agreements. Several executives cooperated, board members testified, consultants surrendered records. The machine finally turned against itself. Within 11 months, 7 individuals received prison sentences. Several more reached settlements. Millions were recovered. Not all of it, but enough. As for Vanessa, she spent 2 years fighting charges. In the end, she accepted a plea agreement. I haven't spoken to her since sentencing. And honestly, I don't know what I would say. The strangest moment came almost a year later. The same financial network that aired my humiliation invited me back. This time for an interview. I sat in almost the exact same chair, under the same lights, facing nearly the same cameras. The host asked the question everyone wanted answered. How does it feel to return after everything that happened? I looked toward the camera. For a moment I remembered that day. The applause, the shock, the smile on Vanessa's face, the feeling of losing everything. Then I answered honestly. Sometimes losing your place in a corrupt system is the best thing that can happen to you. The studio fell silent, and for the first time in nearly a year, I felt something unexpected. Not victory, not revenge, peace. Because the company survived, the truth survived, and somehow, despite everything that happened, so did I. The last time I visited my father's grave, I brought the letter. I didn't leave it there. I simply sat and read it one more time. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't innocent. He made terrible choices. Choices that hurt people, choices that nearly destroyed everything. But for the first time, I understood something important. People are rarely one thing. They can be guilty and regretful, corrupt and ashamed, weak and loving. My father was all of those things. When I finally stood to leave, the sun was setting behind the trees. And for the first time since that live television broadcast began, I stopped asking why. Because I already knew. And sometimes the truth isn't satisfying. It's simply the truth. And that's enough.